Hey everybody, it's tafony here once again, and today's rambling about is going to be on the Winterbloom Modular Castor and Pollux. It is a 14 HP Juno-inspired dual analog oscillator for your rack. It is a amazing sounding module. I have been really nervous about making this video, and full disclosure first, I turn this thing on and I have little idea what I'm doing, and it always sounds great. And I think today it's time I learned what this thing is actually doing when I fiddle with the knobs and get great sounds out of it. So that disclosure out of the way, the disclaimer, I'm not affiliated with Winterbloom in any way. I purchased this module used off a local seller here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with anybody for that matter. And this isn't journalism. This is going to include mistakes because I, more so than the usual videos even, I'm going to have some misconceptions about this thing that hopefully we can go through together. But the most important part, it sounds wonderful, and it sounds like this. Okay. Castor and Pollux. So the first thing I gotta mention right off the rip here as well is I have the version 1. There is a second revision that changes the layout of the panel, but under the hood it is identical in software and in the hardware under the panel to the version 2. It has some changes in the second version. There's like bigger encoders for the frequency changes or the tune knobs, these two top ones. There's some other changes too. I think they made the crossfader way bigger. I don't have the second version. I have the first one and I really love it. And I don't think it's worth upgrading to the second one if you have the first one, given that it is exactly the same. But you know how modular people are, and that includes myself. And if I could just get one thing out of the way with this one too, I adore how this panel looks. That shouldn't count for anything. It doesn't change how the panel sounds or functions or anything. But if you're vain like I am, I guess it's really something. I'm trying to capture it on camera and it's really not coming across, but I tried to put a blank panel beside it so you could just see the, like, I don't know. It's very rainbow, and I tried to dim the lights. We're getting atmospheric in here and whatnot, right? And none of that is coming across, but it's just like, it's a beautiful panel, and it is dreamy. Maybe, is dreamy the right word? There's awesome artwork on the back of the panel too. There's awesome, just like those vain things that don't matter at all that I really enjoy on this thing. But for things that do matter, I love the documentation they have. If you've been on the noise engineering documentation for stuff, you know how they built out like a full web page for their docs, which is awesome. But Winterbloom takes it a step further with theirs, and they have the full docs with like sound demos. And there's even like, maybe I'll just show you the super high production value here. The docks are for the V2, which is fine because all the controls are the same and the software is the same, but like they have sound demos of what's going on beyond the hood in the page. And there is also like interactive little, I mean, I work in web in my full-time job in my real life, in my non-modular life, and I just, this demonstration of pulse width modulation, the freaking, I mean, I love it. I like, props to Winter Modular, because that is, that's phenomenal. Okay. They give you an awesome demonstration too, if I don't bump the camera, of like how, so I had misconceptions about, oh my god, look at that, it's going like an oscilloscope. I had misconceptions about it. I thought that, you know, it's 2 oscillators, but there's 3 mix settings, which I'm learning, and so how, I'm wondering in this case, how can one oscillator have multiple waveforms? Well, they combine in this implementation here, and we're going to try and go through that without an oscilloscope here, right? But you'll see in their awesome documentation, they show you that the ramp volume affects the shape, and then our pulse volume affects the shape, and the pulse width. We love high production value, right? I'm like Red Means recording from Wish. So yeah, there is lots to go through in what ultimately always sounds like a good oscillator, a Juno-inspired thing. So we're going to demonstrate it using my favorite decay envelope generator VCA filter wavefolder combo. Now, I'm going to try and start with this as transparent as possible. So we're going to do that with opening the filter all the way up, turning the resonance or the Q factor all the way down, and then just using it as a VCA that I'm sending gates to. So going over the panel, what you have, you know what? Let's let you hear it, because I've been talking for 5 minutes and no one wants to hear none of that. So right now, let's detach this quick. So the big thing layout-wise that I'll say is just there's the oscillator 1. And I think this is kind of the nice thing about there's definitely huge improvements in version 2, but in version 1, all of the oscillator 1 controls are on the left, all of the oscillator 2 controls are on the right. And then in the middle, there is 3 outputs. There is a oscillator 1 with 1 star, I guess that's Castor, and then this star, which is a Pollux, I guess, and then the 2, which is, when I see the 2, I kind of think like, oh, it's Juno, that's like a chorusy output, but in this case, that is the combination of the 2 oscillators. So we're gonna start in this one, and the distinct outputs are cool, they are useful, but for this video, I will use the crossfader to just do 1 oscillator. So you hear right now, the crossfader is this knob. Nope, I was wrong. That is the LFO knob. This E logo, I shouldn't say logo, this glyph, and if you're a Greek history, Greek mythology nut, please tell me what the E means. But if I crossfade it all the way over to our left oscillator, we're only hearing the left oscillator. So we will now hear. First, I'm just going to go through in sequence on this panel. So we have our pitch. Now I understand there's a fine-tune function in here by holding our button down. I have never used it. As you're going to quickly discover, I'm not the most expert at subtractive synthesis, which is probably an ironic thing for the video you're watching to be saying, but we're going to try our damnedest. And I will just say that whenever I use Castor Pollux, I never hook it up to a tuner. I just tune it by ear until it sounds good, and like, if it's not perfect, it's a nice chorusy effect. Sorry. Yeah, so we're just going to hear 1 oscillator right now. So I'm just going to put it to noon so you can hear it. And you know what? Maybe this octave's a little high. So on the sequencer side, I'm going to go down an octave. Yeah, maybe that's a little too low. Okay. And in saying that, let's go through the panel and make sure I am not misspeaking on the following sections. So there is a pulse width knob with CV input, and you're going to notice right here, at least I really hope, yes, that is accurate. You're going to hear that this doesn't do anything in our current configuration because I don't have the square wave mixed in. Now, let's pull up the docs again before I misspeak even further, if that makes sense. So there's like a knob for a pulse width modulation here, or pulse width, you send it modulation, and then there's a knob here for your square mix. And what I'm trying to find out right at this moment is, yeah, okay, so it's a waveform mixer, right? So right now we're only hearing our ramp wave. It's not a triangle, it's not a saw. I don't really understand the difference between ramp and sawtooth, but if you do know what the difference, you let me know in the comments because I'm curious. So we can mix in our ramp wave. And yeah, right in this configuration here, turn it off. We have no waves at all. So let's bring in our ramp wave. I like to keep that one super high. Then we'll bring in our square wave. And you can pulse width modulate it here. Well, I'm modulating with my fingers, but you can set its pulse width here. And then we'll get down to mixing in more of it. Just try and find something that sounds nice and harmonic. And then maybe I'll roll that off a hair, but then the last one is a square subwave. And then this will really fatten it up, right? Now I'm going to change the tune. We're just going to make my melody sound kind of weird, but we're going to go down a bit just because I think it's a little too high. And then I'll change my melody a little bit. So we're mixing that sub. It starts to sound really fat. It sounds really good. Now, we've only brought in one oscillator here, right? So if I mix in the second oscillator, start to get some of that detuney chorusy stuff too already, right? So now this thing is the same on this side as on the other one, so you don't have to send it its own volt per octave, or you don't have to send it its own frequency. You can just have it follow by default the first input. So I have it sending that and it'll do that, but I think you can set intervals. We'll bring in some of that ramp wave. So if I want to go up an octave, and then let's mix them in. So we'll just tune it by ear, which I said before, I'm not doing this super precisely, we just run it by ear. So that sounds great to me. I really like how that sounds. Now, is it super precise? Probably not. Are analog oscillators going to drift? Absolutely. And this is what we're here for. I want the chorus. I want the Juno. I want the... yeah, so let's go back over to our second. This one, I think you got to be careful, or at least I have to be careful with myself, because I have a tendency to crank the subs because I love how they sound, but then when you get 2 channels worth of them going, it becomes more of just like the super fat things. So yeah. You know what, actually, given that I usually just try and tune them to the same pitch, but this one we can actually like make it sound fatter by adding in lots of sub, add an octave up, so it's not just like conflicting tones down. We have this full smorgasbord, if there's another noun to use, I would. But you get the, like, you know, you have your sub in the first octave, you have your root, you have your octave up, and then you have a sub in between those two. So let's hear how that sounds with some square wave brought in. And yeah, you can, when you crank up the pulse width all the way, it's like too thin to make a noise, right? If that makes any sense. If you were on the oscilloscope, you would see the wave completely disappear. So let's bring it back in. And this is probably a good time to mix them both in because we're going to hear some things cancel each other out depending on our settings, which I don't hear now actually, so that's great. So we'll hear this now. And I'm actually going to bring off a little bit of the high end. Now this thing doesn't actually have noise on board, so it's interesting that I hear a little bit of like raspiness, and I don't know where that's coming from, but I'm curious. So the one thing I had to go over the panel, I guess I knew more about how things work with this, but I didn't understand how the wave shaping combined the waveforms, which it makes more sense now. There's alternate settings for hard sync, there's alternate settings for some other things that are above my pay grade, and I think some of the beauty of this is that it doesn't require that. That stuff is super powerful and it is there if you are interested in it, so don't miss out on that if you are. It is surprisingly deep, but for me, I appreciate there's just the Juno sound was that easy to get, and I love that. Now, what I do want to show though is the different modes. So there's also tweaking modes and shift settings by holding the tab. We're not going to do the shift settings, we're just going to go through the main modes. So when you press this button, you cycle through the modes. This is kind of weird to cycle through, I will say. The feedback of the color panel is cool, but it seems to like it starts, the panel's beautiful, but it starts to drift really quickly and it's hard to know what we're at. So this purple is the hard sync mode. That's how it sounds. It's fine. If we bring in our metallic-y sound, if you bring in your LFO, it's gonna not do a whole lot in this mode, but what it will do in other modes, so this is the chorus mode, the LFO will modulate the frequencies. So if we're going to bring in our internal LFO is always on this icon. Now, you mythology lovers tell me what that icon means, but let's crank it up. We love chorus. There's no control over depth or anything, it's just like how much the LFO is, right? So that's a little too much. Bring it down. A little bit of chorus. I like it. A little bit of detune at that. That's a sweet spot for me. So just open my filter a little more so you can hear it. We'll saturate it. I just want to give you some ways I usually use it because you've been hearing that same 3 notes for the entire video. So that is the chorus mode. That is where I stay. That's my bread and butter. I think that's where I want to be. It sounds great. The other modes are cool. The hard sync, that metallic tone is awesome, but yeah, not something I use it for. Someone who knows subtractive synthesis better than I do might. Now let's go into the LFO pulse width modulation. So now we are routing our internal LFO to the pulse width, and let's crank that up. So just gonna say I never use the other modes, but man, that sounds good. Let's bring up our square waves. Crank up that LFO. Oh, see, that sounds huge, though. A lot of times in these videos, man, I'm telling you, like, oh, you know, it's cool, it's there, I never use it. And then when I actually sit down to, like, put the time into using it, maybe I should be using it. Maybe it's worth it. Okay, so this next mode is the LFO frequency modulation, so giving you some of that FM on board. Yeah, I've said this in other videos, I'm not a big FM fan, for me. Like, to me, yeah, this is just like vibrato, right? And I don't know. Tell me how you use, I'm not trying to engagement farm, I'm just genuinely curious. Like, people love FM, like, frequency modulation is super important, but if it's just like doing a vibrato effect, I don't get it. Tell me how you use it, because I need to learn, clearly. Yeah, and then we'll go back into modes to the hard sync. You know what, there's a use in modular for everything, right? I've said that in every video, but I'm going to say it here again. Like, this metallic tone, I don't know. If you're of the camp that doesn't have drum modules and you want some perky stuff, here's your perky stuff. Yeah, see, again, in saying, I'm like, oh, I would never use that, but that's cool. I don't know. I like to say, ironically, that joys of modular when I talk about things that I hate about modular, and that is something I do love about modular, is like, yeah, oh, I would never use that. Okay, let's try and use it. Well, maybe it's really enjoyable. Okay. Now, with all of that being said, let's get back to the chorus mode, which I've already done. And I just love that. Like, I'm sorry. I wish I had a more articulate way to say, you hear how it sounds really good? Well, I think it's really good. It sounds beautiful. I love the warmness. I love the triangle waves. I love the supersaws. I love the 80s cheese. I love everything about it. Listen to this. Let's just fiddle with some knobs quick. And the last thing I wanted to demonstrate before I say goodbye is I wanted to show you that there is the internal LFO, there are those modes, and this is part of why I think the chorus mode is the most beneficial. I mean, maybe the hard sync isn't something you can do over CV, but you get CV control over everything here. So I'm just going to use my Oct to send it some CV control over the pulse width, so I get chorus, but I also get pulse width modulation. Maybe triangle wave is not the best mode for that. If we send that shape to our mix of the first ramp wave, it's cool too. Or the do FM of just the second. There's fun stuff to be had, right? Bring in your mix of the subs. Be cool if we had a patch point for the crossfade, and I wonder if the second revision has that, but yeah, do some pulse width modulation here. Hope these are related in some way on the Oct side, but let's see. Now I'm going to go to bandpass mode for fun. Yeah, I don't know. Just try and have some fun. But my point with that is that maybe the pulse width modulation you want to send yourself in a way that wasn't that way. But yeah, don't lose your chorus mode is my opinion. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tafony. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.